Hello everyone, and welcome to Stories for Sleepless Nights. I am Luna, your guide through tales of history, mythology, nature, biographies, philosophy, and many other topics. Each story is crafted to help you relax, unwind, and gently drift off to sleep. We love hearing from you, so please feel free to share your story ideas in the comments. Also, remember to follow us on Spotify and YouTube to catch all our episodes. Tonight, we journey back in time to the powerful Roman Republic. We will explore the incredible story of Spartacus, the gladiator who dared to challenge the might of Rome itself. His fight for freedom captured the hearts of many, and his legend lives on. Before we begin our story, let us take a moment to prepare for our journey. Find a comfortable position, whether you are lying down or sitting up. Now, take a deep breath in, filling your lungs slowly. Hold it for a moment. Then, slowly let the air out, feeling your body relax. Let us do that one more time. Breathe in deeply, hold it, and then slowly release the breath. As you breathe out, feel any tension in your body start to melt away. If you feel comfortable, gently close your eyes. Allow your body to become heavy and still. Let yourself settle into this peaceful moment. You are now ready to embark on our story and drift into a restful sleep. The Roman Republic, in the 1st century before the Common Era, was a truly enormous power. Its lands stretched far and wide, from the rainy coasts of Britain across the heart of Europe and down to the hot deserts of North Africa. It even reached into parts of Asia. Rome's armies were strong and well trained. They marched in organized groups called legions, and they had conquered many lands. This made Rome the master of a vast empire, and its power seemed endless. But this great power was built on the backs of countless people who had no freedom. Slavery was a common part of Roman life. People became slaves in different ways. Many were captured during wars that Rome fought. When Roman soldiers won a battle, they often took the defeated people as slaves. Others became slaves because of debt. If a person owed money and could not pay it back, they might be sold into slavery. Children born to slave parents also became slaves themselves. Slaves were not seen as people with rights. They were treated as property, much like tools or animals. A slave owner could buy or sell them, and could even punish them very severely. They had no say in their own lives. slaves did almost all the hard work in Rome. They worked on huge farms called latifundia, planting and harvesting crops. They dug in dark, dangerous mines, pulling out valuable metals. They also worked in homes as cooks, cleaners, and teachers. Slaves built roads, bridges, and the great buildings that still stand today. Without them, Rome's economy would have stopped. Life for most slaves was very harsh. They often faced cruel treatment, long hours, and little food. They lived in constant fear of whips and beatings. Slaves working in the mines or on the large farms suffered the most. They were often chained together in gangs, forced to work until they dropped. Their lives were short and full of pain. The slaves often dreamed of freedom, and sometimes they fought for it. Before Spartacus, there had been other slave revolts. In Sicily, for example, there were 2 big slave wars where thousands of slaves rose up against their Roman masters. These revolts showed that the anger and desire for freedom among slaves were always present. But no rebellion had ever grown as large or caused as much trouble for Rome as the one led by Spartacus. Among these slaves, there was a special group, the gladiators. These men were usually slaves or criminals forced to fight for public entertainment. They trained in special schools, learning to use swords, spears, and shields. They would step into grand arenas, facing roaring crowds, ready to fight other gladiators, or even wild animals, often to the death. It was a brutal life, filled with blood and violence. Yet, some gladiators became famous, and a very few even won their freedom. For most, though each fight could be their last, they lived a life of constant danger, always at the edge of death. Among these many slaves was a man named Spartacus. He stood out from the others. Spartacus was likely from Thrace, a land to the north of Greece, a place known for its fierce warriors. The Thracians often fought against the Roman Empire. No one knows for sure how Spartacus became a slave. Some stories say he was a soldier who fought alongside the Romans, but then deserted. Others believe he was a captured warrior, taken prisoner in one of Rome's many wars against his people. Whatever his past, he was a strong, intelligent man, marked by the struggles of his homeland. His journey into slavery led him to a small city called Capua, located about 120 miles south of Rome. In Capua, there was a man named Lentulus Batiatus. Batiatus was a Lanista, which means he owned a gladiatorial school, or a ludus. It was a business based on violence and entertainment. Spartacus was bought by Batiatus, becoming one of his many gladiators. Life inside the ludus was harsh and unforgiving. The gladiators lived in crowded cells, often chained and under constant watch. Their days were filled with brutal training. They learned to fight with different weapons, depending on what kind of gladiator they were. Some were called murmillos, wearing heavy armor and carrying a large shield and a short sword. Others were Thracian gladiators, like Spartacus himself, who used a small, round shield and a curved sword called a sica. There were also retiarii, who fought with a net and a trident. The trainers, often former gladiators themselves, pushed them hard, beating them if they did not perform well. Every move was about killing or avoiding death. Each day was a reminder of their fate. They ate simple food, usually a mix of barley and vegetables, meant to make them strong, not happy. They slept on hard beds, listening to the sounds of their fellow gladiators, men from different lands, all trapped together. The constant threat of the arena hung over them. They knew that soon they would step into the sand, facing another man or a wild animal with thousands of Romans watching, eager for blood. Most would die in the arena, their lives ending quickly for the amusement of others. This harsh life took a heavy toll on their minds and bodies. Yet in this dark place, a strange kind of bond formed between the gladiators. They were all in the same terrible situation. They shared their fears, their anger, and their desperate hopes for freedom. This shared suffering created a strong sense of camaraderie among them. It was in this oppressive place, surrounded by others who felt the same, that the desire for freedom grew strong within Spartacus and his companions. The idea of breaking free, of fighting for their own lives instead of for Roman entertainment, became a burning thought. The burning desire for freedom soon turned into a desperate plan. Spartacus, along with two other strong gladiators, Crixus and Oenomaus, began to organize their fellow captives. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing their dream of escape. The risk was enormous, But the promise of liberty was a powerful motivator. One day the chance came. About 70 to 78 gladiators, fueled by their shared hope, made their move. They grabbed whatever they could find in the school's kitchen: knives, spits, and other utensils. These were not proper weapons, but they were enough to begin their fight. They overwhelmed the guards who stood in their way. The breakout was fierce and quick. The gladiators fought their way out of the ludus in Capua. Once free, they did not scatter. They knew they needed a place to regroup and defend themselves. Their eyes turned to Mount Vesuvius, a large volcano standing tall in the distance, about 10 miles away. It was a perfect hiding spot, with steep slopes and dense woods, making it hard for Roman soldiers to reach them. The gladiators climbed the mountain, finding shelter in its high, wild terrain. News of the gladiator escape soon reached Rome, but the officials did not take it seriously. They thought it was just a small group of runaway slaves, a policing problem, not a threat. So, they sent a Roman praetor named Gaius Claudius Glaber. He led about 3,000 soldiers, not a full legion, but a collection of local militia and recruits. Glaber and his men marched to Mount Vesuvius, confident they would easily capture the escaped gladiators. They set up camp at the base of the mountain, blocking the only known path down. They believed they had Spartacus and his men trapped. But Spartacus was not just a fighter, he was a clever leader. He saw the Roman camp below. Instead of trying to fight his way down the known path, he looked for another way. The side of Vesuvius, where they were camped, was a sheer, rocky cliff thought to be impossible to climb down. No one expected an attack from there. Spartacus and his men gathered wild grapevines that grew on the mountain. They twisted these vines into strong, long ropes. Under the cover of night, the gladiators slowly lowered themselves down the cliff face. It was a dangerous descent, but they moved silently, one by one, until they were behind Glaber's unsuspecting forces. At dawn, Spartacus launched his surprise attack. The Romans woke up to the terrifying sight of gladiators charging into their camp from an unexpected direction. They were caught completely off guard. Panic spread through Glaber's ranks. The Roman soldiers, who had been so arrogant, were quickly routed. Many were killed, and the rest fled in terror. This was a huge victory for Spartacus. It showed the world that these gladiators were not just runaways, but a force to be reckoned with. Victory at Mount Vesuvius brought more than just fame. The gladiators took the weapons and armor left behind by the fleeing Romans. Now they had proper swords, shields, and helmets. This improved their fighting ability greatly. Word of Spartacus's daring escape and victory spread like wildfire throughout the countryside. Slaves working on nearby farms and estates, hearing of a chance for freedom, began to leave their masters. They flocked to Mount Vesuvius, eager to join Spartacus's growing rebel army. What started as a small band of gladiators was quickly becoming a powerful force. After the triumph at Mount Vesuvius, the trickle of runaways turned into a flood. Thousands of people, hearing of Spartacus's victory, began to join his cause. It was no longer just a small band of gladiators. Now, the army swelled with agricultural slaves from the vast Roman estates, overworked miners, and even poor free citizens who felt crushed by Rome's heavy hand. These new recruits came from many different backgrounds, speaking different languages, but they all shared a common desire for freedom from Rome. Spartacus proved to be an extraordinary leader. He had a rare gift for bringing these diverse groups together. He understood their different needs and managed to keep order among them. He made sure that any spoils taken from Roman camps were shared fairly among everyone, which built trust and loyalty. His army, though made up of untrained men, began to move with purpose. Rome, still underestimating the threat, sent more forces to deal with the rebellion. 2 Roman praetors, Publius Varinius and Lucius Furius, were dispatched. They led separate armies, confident they could crush the slave revolt. But Spartacus was always one step ahead. He used the rugged Italian landscape to his advantage. He would lead the Romans into difficult terrain, then spring ambushes from hidden spots. His men, lighter and more agile, often outmaneuvered the heavily armored Roman legions. In one instance, he pretended to retreat, drawing the Roman forces into a narrow pass, only to turn and trap them. The Romans suffered humiliating defeats, losing their camps and weapons to the rebels. Spartacus's army grew stronger with each victory, taking more swords, shields, and armor from the defeated Roman soldiers. At this point, Spartacus's main goal was likely not to march on Rome itself. Instead, it seemed he wanted to lead his people out of Italy, perhaps across the Alps, to return them to their homelands. He knew that staying in Italy meant a continuous fight against an endless supply of Roman soldiers. He aimed for escape, not conquest. Back in Rome, the repeated defeats caused growing fear and concern. What started as a simple policing problem, a runaway slave issue, had spiraled out of control. The Senate and the people of Rome were now facing an actual army, one that was repeatedly challenging their authority. The news of Roman praetors being routed by slaves was a deep shame for the Republic. The rebellion was no longer a minor annoyance. It was becoming a serious threat to the stability of Roman society. Yet many still believed it was a matter for praetors, not the full might of Rome's consular armies. They would soon learn how wrong they were. Even with these great victories, Spartacus faced many hard challenges. His army had grown very large, perhaps as many as 120,000 men, women, and children. Feeding so many people, finding them weapons, and keeping them all united was a huge task. Many of the new recruits were not trained warriors. They were runaway slaves, used to farm work or mining, not fighting. They also came from many different lands and spoke different languages. Their desires were not always the same. Some simply wanted to escape Italy and go home. Others wanted to stay and plunder the rich Roman lands. This difference in goals led to the first major split in the rebel ranks. Crassus, one of the original gladiator leaders, broke away. He led about 30,000 of his Gallic and Germanic followers. These men preferred to stay in southern Italy, raiding towns and collecting riches. They did not want to march north and try to leave Italy. Spartacus, however, knew that staying meant endless war against Rome. Crassus and his men soon met a harsh end. Roman legions, now commanded by two consuls, Gnaeus Cornelius Lentulus and Lucius Gellius Publicola, were sent to crush the revolt. These were not the small forces of praetors. These were full armies. Crassus's faction was caught by the Romans near Mount Garganus. The battle was fierce. Crassus and his men fought with courage, but they were outnumbered and outmatched by the disciplined Roman soldiers. Crassus himself was killed in the fight, along with many of his followers. When Spartacus heard the news of Crixus's death, he was deeply saddened and angry. To honor his fallen comrade, Spartacus chose a grim form of revenge. He gathered 300 Roman captives he had taken in earlier battles. He then forced these Roman prisoners to fight each other to the death, just like gladiators in the arena. It was a stark reminder of the cruel life he and Crixus had been forced to live. After this tragedy, Spartacus knew he had to move. He understood that staying in central Italy was too dangerous. His plan to escape Italy became even more urgent. He decided to lead his army south, all the way to the tip of the Italian peninsula, a region called Bruttium. His hope was to cross the narrow strait to Sicily, an island with a history of slave revolts, or to find ships there that could take his people away from Roman lands forever. Rome's response to the ongoing rebellion was now truly serious. The Senate had finally understood that this was not just a small slave uprising. It was a full-scale war. They had appointed 2 consuls, the highest military commanders, to lead powerful armies against Spartacus. This showed Rome's absolute commitment. They would use all their might to end the rebellion and prevent any more challenges to their power. The stage was set for the final, desperate struggle. Rome's growing alarm over Spartacus's rebellion led them to appoint a new commander. This was Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of the wealthiest and most ambitious men in Rome. Crassus was a senator who deeply desired political power and military glory. He saw the slave revolt as a chance to prove his leadership and make a name for himself. He was given immense power and 8 Roman legions, about 40,000 soldiers, to crush Spartacus once and for all. Crassus knew that the previous Roman commanders had failed because their soldiers were afraid and lacked discipline. To change this, he brought back an old, brutal punishment called decimation. If a unit showed cowardice or ran from battle, Crassus would line them up. Then, 1 out of every 10 soldiers was chosen by lot and beaten to death by his own comrades. This terrifying act was meant to instill extreme fear and obedience. It worked. His legions, once demoralized, became disciplined and ruthless. Spartacus, with his army of thousands, had marched south into Bruttium, hoping to find a way to escape Italy. But Crassus was a clever and determined foe. He ordered his men to build a massive wall and a deep ditch. This barrier stretched for about 35 miles across the narrowest part of the Bruttium Peninsula. The wall was 10 feet high, and the ditch was 10 feet wide. This trapped Spartacus and his army. They were cut off from the rest of Italy, with the sea on 3 sides and Crassus's wall blocking their escape by land. Trapped, Spartacus tried to find a way out. He began to negotiate with Cilician pirates, known for their ships and their willingness to transport anyone for a price. Spartacus offered them a large sum of gold and silver to ferry his army across the narrow strait to Sicily. He hoped to reignite slave revolts on the island and continue his fight there. The pirates took his payment, but they never returned. They betrayed Spartacus, leaving his army stranded and desperate. Winter then settled in, bringing harsh conditions. Spartacus's army, trapped behind Crassus's wall, suffered greatly. Food became scarce, and many faced starvation. The cold winds and lack of proper shelter took a heavy toll. Hope began to fade for many of the rebels. Spartacus felt the immense pressure to find a way out, as his army grew weaker each day. He knew they could not survive the winter if they remained trapped. In a daring move, Spartacus decided on a desperate breakout. One cold, stormy night, when a blizzard raged, he ordered his men to fill a section of Crassus's ditch with earth, branches, and the bodies of fallen animals. Then, under the cover of the storm, they managed to climb over the wall. It was a chaotic and brutal fight, but Spartacus and a large part of his army successfully breached Crassus's defenses. They escaped the trap, though at a heavy cost in lives. This act showed Spartacus's continued resilience and his amazing tactical skill, even when facing overwhelming odds. After their daring escape from Crassus's wall, Spartacus and his army moved with great speed. They marched east, heading towards the port city of Brundisium. Spartacus hoped to find ships there and finally escape Italy. But fate was not on his side. As they neared Brundisium, they learned that Roman forces, led by the generals Pompey and Lucullus, were returning to Italy. Pompey was coming back from Spain, and Lucullus from Asia Minor. They blocked any chance of escape by sea. Spartacus was trapped once more, this time between 3 Roman armies. The end was near. Spartacus gathered his forces for one last, desperate fight. The final battle took place near the Silarus River. Crassus's legions, reinforced and full of determination, met the slave army. The Romans had an overwhelming number of soldiers, far outnumbering the rebels. Spartacus's men were exhausted from years of fighting, constantly on the move, and weakened by hunger and fear. They were no match for the fresh, disciplined Roman legions. Spartacus knew this was their last stand. He rode to the front lines, fighting with incredible bravery. He reportedly tried to reach Crassus himself, cutting down Roman soldiers who stood in his way. He fought to the very end, a true warrior. Many accounts say he was severely wounded, but continued to fight until he fell. His body was never found after the battle. It was likely buried under a pile of other fallen soldiers. Or perhaps the Romans deliberately hid it to prevent it from becoming a symbol. With Spartacus gone, the remaining slave army lost all hope and fell apart. The aftermath was brutal. The Roman legions showed no mercy. Thousands of Spartacus's followers were killed on the battlefield. 6,000 survivors were captured. Crassus ordered them to be crucified along the Appian Way, the main road from Capua to Rome. For miles and miles, the bodies of the crucified slaves lined the road, a horrifying warning to anyone who dared to challenge Roman authority. It was a gruesome display meant to crush any thought of future rebellion. Despite its ultimate failure, Spartacus's rebellion left a lasting mark. He became a symbol of freedom, a testament to the human spirit's desire for liberty, even against overwhelming odds. His name has echoed through history, inspiring many who fought against oppression. He influenced later thinkers and revolutionaries, reminding people that even the enslaved can rise up and demand their rights. The revolt also deeply impacted Roman society. It exposed the deep cracks in the Roman Republic, especially the dangers of relying so heavily on slavery. The fear of another slave uprising stayed with Rome for a long time. The rebellion also played a part in the political struggles of the late Republic, showing how unstable things had become. It was a stark reminder that even the mightiest empire could be shaken by the cries for freedom. Now, as our story of Spartacus comes to a close, let us take a moment to gently bring our attention back to ourselves. Allow your body to settle into its resting place. Let your mind begin to unwind. We will do a simple body scan to help you relax even more deeply. Start by bringing your attention to your toes. Feel them resting inside your shoes or against the blanket. Notice any feelings there without trying to change anything. Just observe. Now, slowly move your attention up to the soles of your feet, then to the tops of your feet. Feel your ankles, then your lower legs. Let your awareness move into your knees. Feel the back of your knees, then your upper legs. Move into your hips, feeling them heavy and supported. Now, bring your attention to your stomach. Notice the gentle rise and fall of your breath here. Feel your lower back, then your middle back, and then your upper back, resting against the surface beneath you. Let your attention move into your chest. Feel your shoulders, letting them drop away from your ears. Move down your arms, through your elbows, and into your forearms. Feel your wrists, your hands, and each of your fingers. Notice any sensations there. Now bring your attention to your neck, letting any tension here simply melt away. Feel your jaw, letting it soften. Relax your cheeks, your eyes, and your forehead. Let your entire head feel calm and at ease. Allow your whole body to feel heavy, warm, and deeply relaxed. You are safe and supported. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stories for Sleepless Nights. We hope it helped you find some rest and gently drift away from your thoughts. You can find Stories for Sleepless Nights on Spotify and YouTube. Please leave a comment with any topics you would like to hear about in future episodes. We love hearing from you. I am Luna, and I hope to join you again soon for another tale. Until then, we wish you a peaceful and restorative good night.